Ma'agan Michael, a kibbutz on Israel's Mediterranean coast. Here, where 50 years ago a big swamp spread at the foot of the Carmel Range, is now one of the biggest nature reserves in the Middle East. The fish ponds and orchards of the neighboring kibbutz villages attract migrating birds on their way to Africa. Gail Rubin, an American nature photographer, is sitting one Saturday afternoon near the fish pond. That is when 2 rubber boats reach the deserted beach, bringing 11 members of the PLO, carrying arms, ammunition, and demolition charges. Gail is preparing to show her photos in an exhibition to be held in New York of nature photographs from all over the world. She had planned this stay at Ma'agan Michael for a long time. The infiltrators had undergone intense training in Lebanon. This was their 3rd attempt to penetrate. The first 2 had failed before they left the mothership. Their original plan was to land at the Tel Aviv beach, but a navigating mistake took them 80 kilometers north. They get ready, eat, then start advancing to the main highway. The first person they meet is Gail. After a short conversation, they drag her out of the car, lead her to a nearby quarry, and shoot her on the spot. Gail was the first victim of that bloody afternoon which saw 34 people massacred. After killing Gail, the marauders reached the coastal road, one of Israel's main arteries, a 100-kilometer-long highway between Tel Aviv and Haifa. They fire at a passing car, then hijack a bus with weekend vacationers returning home. Among them was Yossi Hochman and his family. His home is the Neve Yam kibbutz, just 5 minutes from the landing spot.
As we were traveling, the terrorists killed a man who tried to come to the help of his wounded child. They shot him and ruthlessly killed him. We reached the country club region. The security forces had set up a roadblock, resolved to stop the bus at any price. They had by then realized the implications. They fired on the rear tires and the bus stopped. Everybody, families, men, women and children, started to get out through the front door. I turned around to take my wife and 2 children, and just then a grenade exploded. Apparently, it had been thrown by the terrorist the moment I had fired on him before. Before he was dead, he managed to take the safety ring out of the grenade and throw it in the direction of Rivkale and the children.
The grenade that wounded Yossi also killed Rivkale and their 2 children, 9 and 4. They didn't have a chance. It was a direct hit at immediate range. Their bodies stayed on the bus, which burned all night. It's 1974. The United Nations, New York.
That's what happened in the United Nations. You've got to remember the United Nations today, out of 152 members, only 30 approximately are democracies, such as we in Israel or in the United States understand a democracy. And so the net result has been that anybody is recognized by the so-called Third World or the so-called non-aligned nations as a liberation movement. It doesn't matter what sort of movement they are. After all, remember a horrible country, a regime which carried out a Holocaust like that in Cambodia, or Idi Amin's regime in Uganda. They were recognized in the United Nations as legitimate regimes. Uganda was even a member of the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations under Idi Amin. So this, of course, once they recognize Arafat as the legitimate leader of the Palestinian people, it doesn't matter if he's never been elected to that or never been appointed to that, it's then plain sailing for them to bring him to the United Nations.
You initiated this map of the whole world and our office in different, you see?
This red color is a country which recognized the PLO and which fought with us in the United Nations in 1974. And we have offices in about 105 countries. We have offices.
They are now been to the United Nations. Would they have got where they are today and have become a viable force in Middle East politics if it hadn't been for these acts of terrorism?
With their oil, they would. I think what brought them to the United Nations is the oil and not the blood.
In September 1970, 3 planes belonging to British Airways, TWA and Swiss Air are hijacked. 2 of them, with passengers and crew, are taken to Zerka in Jordan.
Just driven for an hour across the open desert to this incredibly dangerous and dramatic situation in which the people in these 2 aircraft find themselves. The aircraft marooned here in the middle of the sun-baked salt flats. There are more than 150 commandos dug in around these 2 aircraft at this particular moment. It's an incredible situation. The people are being held here as hostage. The commandos have told the army that if they don't move back, that if they don't leave them alone, they'll blow up the 2 aircraft immediately. And of course, they're threatening to do this if they don't get what they want in the ultimatums they're presenting to at least 2 foreign governments.
The PFLP is completely responsible for the hostages. We will treat them in the same way their governments treat our own prisoners. The PFLP warns that any stupid intervention to free the hostages will only endanger their lives.
The governments give in to the terrorists' demands and the hostages are released, but not the planes.
What would have happened to the hostages on the British plane if the British government hadn't released Layla Khalid?
Layla Khalid was released.
Yes. But what would have happened if she hadn't been?
I said Layla Khalid was released.
Yes, but that isn't answering my question.
I know. I know definitely that doesn't answer your question.
Layla Khalid was arrested after trying to hijack an El Al plane over the English Channel. She was tried in England and sentenced to jail, but she was set free by order of Her Majesty's government.
He is not only a Jew, he is a Zionist. And he helps Israel. We know that, and we have many, what do you call it in English?
The names of people who do help.
Yes. For example, Rothschild, Steve, other people I cannot mention now so that they will not go directly and hide. These are the protectors.
They are civilians.
You think that they are civilians, and they work under a cover that they are civilians, but they are not civilians really.
Terror of the PLO variety is not content with just hitting Zionist or Jewish targets. In May 1972, 3 young Japanese members of the Red Army terror organization arrive at Ben Gurion International Airport. They take out machine guns from their bags and open up with murderous fire, shooting in every direction. In a few minutes, they are shot by security men, but too late to prevent the atrocity.
Those 2 Japanese were originally recruited into the United Red Army in Japan. They then went for training in North Korea. They were then recruited by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And they went for final training and briefing at a refugee camp in Lebanon. From there they went to Frankfurt, West Germany, where they picked up false papers. From there they went to Rome, where they were provided with Czech weapons in suitcases, which they loaded into an Air France aircraft and landed at Tel Aviv airport, took out the guns and shot down 24 people in the baggage lounge. Now, the tragedy of that was that the 24 people they shot were most of them Puerto Rican pilgrims who had nothing whatever to do with Israel or the Arabs or politics at all, just victims, innocent victims of indiscriminate terrorism.
Have you killed Israelis?
Yes.
How many?
I don't know.
Soldiers?
Yes.
Did he kill people already?
هل قتلت إسرائيليين؟
No.
Yes. How many? كم واحد?
ما بعد.
He doesn't count them.
Hijacking proved its effectiveness. Governments gave in to the terrorists' demands. But when an Air France plane was hijacked and flown to Entebbe in Uganda, the response was different. An Israeli striking force got there, 5,000 kilometers from home base, and in a lightning action, freed the hijacked hostages and brought them back to Israel.
Okay, he is now in the cockpit. This is Captain Martar Mahmoud. We gave you enough time to prove that you want to change your imperialist mentality and to let our revolutionaries out of your imperialist fascist prisons, but unfortunately you didn't cooperate.
The Entebbe lesson had been learned. When a Lufthansa plane was hijacked to Mogadishu in Somalia, German commando forces carried out a rescue operation similar to Entebbe. The plane was freed, but only after the captain had been brutally slain in cold blood.
He had to kneel down, and Mahmoud said, this is going to be a revolutionary trial. He shouted it, and he shouted it with some kind of triumph. And he said, you traded in your lousy little life for the life of 86 passengers. I was going to blow up the whole airplane because you ran away and you coward and things like that. And the captain said, please, Captain Mahmoud, Marta Mahmoud, sir, can I explain? And he was all the time hit in the face, and so it come only parts of sentences out all the time. Then he said, the only problem was to come back to the airplane. And, that he didn't say it in once. The only problem was to come back to the airplane. Please let me explain again. Things like that. And so while he was saying this, Mahmoud all the time cried, do you plead guilty? Shouted, do you plead guilty or not guilty? Mahmoud hit him in the face. His head was flying around. And before he could turn it back, he was shot. And the bullet went in here.
We are going to execute all the passengers and the crew.
He said, on the floor. So I kneeled on the floor, and I didn't really realize what he wanted. And I looked around, and I saw my hand case open there. And then he had my pen, a black pen, in his hand. And he showed me and said, what is that? And I said, that's my pen. And then he showed the star, the mark of this pen. And he asked, what is that? And I said, well, that is the mark of the firm. And he said, no, you're lying, this is a Jewish star. And I said, I'm sure it's not a Jewish star. So he hit me in my face, and he said, you're Jewish.
We gave you enough.
The Entebbe and Mogadishu operations proved to the world that despite the risks, it was possible and essential to act against terrorist strikes.
All the friends, like myself, were quite conscious of the fact that what was on stake was the credibility of the ability of the Western civilization to stand up against such kind of threat and blackmail.
This isn't just a problem for an individual government. This is a global problem requiring a global response. And that means not every man for himself, but governments must hang together or they'll hang separately.
These were the words of Fuad Simli, a Palestinian poet and ideologist. The poet in him was not disturbed by the fact that the Olympic Games are a symbol of cooperation between nations, of peace, or at least a ceasefire. The Israeli sportsmen were taken hostage in their living quarters in the Olympic village at Munich. Some were murdered on the spot. The rest were taken to the airport and put on board a helicopter to be taken elsewhere. The German police opened fire. The terrorists first shot their hostages, then answered the police fire. The helicopter went up in flames. 11 of Israel's top sportsmen were killed with their hands tied. The world paid them final homage, and right away sportsmen went on breaking records and organizers went on checking how many seats were occupied. 11 coffins were flown to Israel. In Libya, Gaddafi's government felt no hesitation or embarrassment about receiving the bodies of the terrorists killed during the action and hastened to give the murderers a state funeral. But it is not just in this way that the Arab countries assist the PLO terror organization, which they themselves set up in 1964.
Just last month in October, at the Schiphol airport in Amsterdam, where a diplomat, an Algerian carrying a diplomatic passport, was caught with 6 kilos of TNT, something like, I believe, 19 letter bombs with the pins, the little piece of wire sticking out so they're easy to recognize, and electric frying pans, 6 hand grenades, and an assortment of dangerous toys, you might say. And there he was on a passport which had been issued him by the Algerian government, not even knowing that it was he that the passport was going to.
What's this new sort of international diplomat who's appearing on the scene now, the roving Fatah ambassador?
Well, the roving Fatah ambassador, of whom there are several, are persons who carry either an Algerian passport or a Syrian passport or a South Yemen passport. I believe 1 or 2 cases of Iraqi passport, although I'm not sure of that, who simply carry a diplomatic passport which enables them to go free of all the things that diplomats go free of, such as searches at airports, and do pretty much as they will. Now, in Holland is a very good example. This bloke who was carrying enough explosives to blow up the whole airport, he was freed in 24 hours.
Does then suspicion fall upon those people who abuse the diplomatic passport system?
Oh, yes. I think we have all the evidence we need now to show that the Black September organization, other organizations like it, are absolutely dependent on the diplomatic bag, certain diplomatic facilities, which they just couldn't get in any other way.
The Fatah doesn't hesitate to enlist young boys of 10 to 15. These youngsters are sent on raids with no experience but full of enthusiasm. Without a doubt, their training looks impressive, but Fatah has never attacked a military target. Its commanders know the value of the training their men get. The men are sent to attack civilians only. International terror groups also ask and get help from the PLO, which has always rejected any compromise solution. The slogan is, "Terrorists of the world, unite."
How do you feel about working with revolutionary groups in Germany or Japan or South America?
As a committed world revolutionary, I am prepared to work with anyone who wishes to overthrow imperialism.
And are you prepared to see anything done?
What do you mean?
Anything. Any kind of operation, no matter whether innocent people die or...
In dealing with a German technocratic fascistic mind that we have, for instance, have had to deal with in the past few years and how they have operated, to deal with that type of person, you have to operate in a like manner. The assassination of our comrades in prison in Germany is certainly not an act of humanity. The destruction of our people everywhere is not an act of humanity. And if you expect me to be a super Jesus, as that of Jimmy Carter first, and as that of the Nixons and the Fords and the Schmidts and the Callahans and all the criminals of Europe who are certain as rulers and just rulers.
We are from Quebec, Montreal, especially.
Why are you here?
We are here for training, military training, mostly training.
In what purpose?
Purpose is to make a socialist revolution in Quebec first, and in North America second.
And they made a strategy. And in this strategy, they
took the weapons. Of course, they had to.
But that strategy involves murder itself.
What's murder?
Murder is a dead German pilot in Mogadishu.
The Palestinian National Charter, as it's called, is a racist document adopted by a terrorist organization. In Articles 5 and 6, it in effect says that any Jews born in Palestine or Israel or who came there after 1917 do not belong there and would be exiled, which means that 95% of the Jews, according to this charter, have to be exiled from their own country. In Article 15, they lay down that the liberation of Palestine is a national duty from the Arab point of view to purge the Zionist presence from Palestine, and purging is a euphemism for something far more serious. Article 19 maintains that the state of Israel is null and void. In other words, it denies its existence. Article 21 says that they reject every solution that is a substitute for a complete liberation of Palestine. Now, that has been emphasized and re-emphasized in what's called the 10 Points for War, which were adopted in 1974 by the Palestine National Council in Cairo. Now, since then, they've adopted in talks only, never in any document, nor in any statement. What they say tactically is one thing, and they deny it always the next day.
Despite Arafat's efforts to present his PLO as a roof organization in complete control of all its terror factions, the real picture is neither so smooth nor so convincing. Endless conflicts and different approaches and opinions prevail between the various internal groups of this PLO.
The PLO is, in my judgment, a facade organization that represents the Arab official regime and the ruling class, ex-ruling class of the Palestinian people, superimpose upon that the feudal element and the few people who fought in the past few years in the revolution and deserted its lines.
The method used to show that Fatah is moderate compared to other organizations is well known. But in fact, no real difference exists. They differ only in their public relations approach to the outside world.
Don't you think it's a strange coincidence, Dr. Habash, that the one surviving member of the recent Lufthansa hijack, a young lady, told her police questioners in Mogadishu that she belongs to the ultra-left wing of the PFLP? Why would she say that?
This concerns her. She can say what she believes. But the PFLP, represented by its central committee, has nothing to do with all these actions.
But why should she say that?
Well, she is free to say it.
But perhaps she is a member of the
No, she is not.
Do you know who she is?
Of course. I don't know her, but I do know that the PFLP did not plan for such an action.
You know that we are against this kind of job, which is, we called it, it is a terrorism.
Terrorism?
Yes, terrorism. We are against it. From this barrel, through this barrel, we can get all what we want.
They are a loose coalition of feuding organizations. They frequently kill each other more than they kill Israelis. They have been in the two major pitched battles in which they've been involved have been against the established regime in Jordan and the established regime in Lebanon, not against Israel. If the PLO covenant were known to the civilized world, instead of talking about it, if the details were known, no self-respecting country would back them.
المناسبة هذه ترفع رأس الثورة وبتجرني إلى ذكريات قديمة في الأيام الأولى اللي أعطيت فيها الأمر لأخوكم محمود حجازي أول أسير في الثورة الفلسطينية. ما كانش في إمكانية نعطيله إلا السن وفقط دغتين، يعني مشطين، وتطورت الثورة وكبرت الثورة
كبرت الثورة بهذا الشلال من الدماء الذي سقط طوال 13 عاما ليقول للأمة العربية جميعها أن الثورة الفلسطينية وأن المناضلون في الثورة الفلسطينية أمناء على هذه الثورة التي تمثل الطليعة الأولى، وفي جبل النار وفي القدس وفي يافا وفي حيفا نحن معا وسويا حتى النصر.